It was 2 years ago. I got stuck once at a railway station in a provincial town of V. I was late for a transfer to my train, and the next one was on schedule only in the morning. And I stayed to while away the night in a deserted, uncomfortable building. It was the cold eve of October. In the shabby station building, which has been getting more and more dilapidated since the end of the Soviet era, the wind swept the floors instead of the cleaner. A damp draft drove some pieces of paper and scraps of packages across the dirty floor. It was late at night and my eyes were getting pretty sleepy. But I didn't want to huddle on the peeling seats so much, and it's uncomfortable. And it's cold, and a backpack, what's good, they'll snatch and not blink an eye. In a word, after considering the current bleak situation, I trudged to the tiny cafeteria. It wasn't particularly cozy either, but it was at least a little lighter and warmer there than in the dull gray main building. Having ordered coffee, in the role of which the Berta a la Nescafe acted here, I sat down at a plastic table closer to one of the 60-watt light bulbs hanging from the ceiling. I had an old Geo number in my backpack, and I hoped to pass the 7 long hours of waiting for the train with the help of coffee and reading. Time passed. It was past midnight, suspecting that the next day I would have an ungodly stomach ache from this ungodly mud. I still continued to drink it. On the one hand, I wanted to sleep terribly, on the other, something inside warned me against trying to disconnect. I had to hold on. And so hour after hour. I woke up from the fact that I bumped my nose into a glossy page with a photo of the Taj Mahal. Cursing sleepily, I raised my head and barely restrained a scream. Across from me at the table, with his hands neatly folded on dirty plastic, sat a thin man, and stared at me without blinking. He was skinny, overgrown, unshaven, in an old raincoat with a torn spitting image of a homeless man. But what really scared me was not so much his appearance as his eyes deep set, pale gray, as if clouded by cataracts. And a fixed gaze, as if glued to my face with glue. Just thinking about how long he had been sitting there, staring at me, sleeping, made me feel sick. I tried to cover my fright with aggression. Who are you? What do you need? Aren't there enough other tables for you? I don't know what answer I was waiting for, but definitely not the one that sounded. The voice of the homeless man was deaf and cracked. It felt like he was speaking from somewhere far away. Divanka, are you waiting for the train? Damn. I thought. And what else can you do at the train station? But in response, she said dryly, I'm waiting, fast passenger 419, no, actually. The strange interlocutor leaned closer and stared even more intently, although much more, at me. But he'll be here soon. What's it to me? No. What kind of madhouse is this? Why is this lunatic clinging to me? And in general, why does the barmaid let all sorts of homeless people into the institution? I tried to jump up from my seat, but it was not there. The guy grabbed my hand and pressed it to the table with such force that if I had pulled at full strength, he would have easily twisted my elbow. Still looking me straight in the eye, he spoke slowly, steadily, and very convincingly. You shouldn't have. The girl didn't leave here. Don't you know that there are no trains running here tonight except for the 419th? I shook my head negatively. Soon he will arrive. Do you hear the rumble is growing? The little man took his wild gaze away from me for a second. And I suddenly realized that it had been a long time since I had heard a single passing train. That over the past couple of hours, the only sounds I've heard were the hum of a light bulb under the ceiling and the rustle of garbage on the floor. Neither heard nor seen. Shoo, listen, the bum muttered and looked at me again. Listen, and I heard, from somewhere in the incredible distance, the rumble of a train was approaching. A train rushing at a wild speed. No rattling of wheels at the joints of the rails, no signals that usually accompany such a frenzied movement, only a growing hum. My creepy interlocutor spoke again. Once a year, Passenger Express 419 goes on the route. In complete silence, in the complete darkness of the new moon, he rushes along the rails. And no one dares to step in his way and stop his wild rut. No one dares not wait for him. The bum licked his lips and giggled. He rushes along the rails, stuffed to the brim. There is not a single empty place on the shelves of the cars, everyone is occupied. Every year he sweeps along the roads, and every year his wagons are replenished. Tens and tens of years, dozens and dozens of people. And no one can get off this train. They would like to, but they can't. He burst into a fit of insane laughter. The dead can't get off the train. The carriages are full of them, they beat on the windows and beg to stop the train. But he will never stop, never. And they are doomed to come alive one night a year. Just one night, in which they tirelessly pray for salvation. My heart leapt into my throat, and I could barely contain my nausea. An unexpected chill began to creep under my collar, but you're lucky. I'll stop at this station. The rumble was getting closer, turning into a rumble. And immediately a cold winter whirlwind burst into the hall. My interlocutor let me go and briskly stepped to the window. I forgot to say that the cafeteria had huge floor-to-ceiling windows facing the platform. The silhouette of a shabby little man in an old raincoat stood out sharply against the background of the window, suddenly illuminated by a murky light shining a fluorescent light bulb through the water column. For a second I stared at the silhouette of my interlocutor, and then my gaze, damn it. I focused on what was passing at breakneck speed outside the high window. I must admit, I screamed. The wild speed with which dark cars flashed past the station, alas, did not prevent me from seeing hundreds and hundreds of pale, bloodless faces in the windows, with black gaps of open mouths and faces distorted with horror. They screamed wordlessly, begged, and seemed to be beating with all their might against the blank glass. But I didn't hear a single sound except the humming of the rails. A shroud of silence enveloped the ghost train. All this lasted barely 10 seconds. But these were the longest and most monstrous moments of my life, during which my creepy interlocutor stepped forward and instantly disappeared into the dead light oozing from the windows of the fast passenger 419. The train flashed and disappeared, and the hum accompanying it melted away in the distance. For long, terribly long minutes I sat motionless and incoherently muttering to myself something like, "Please don't. Please. Please," until the sharp, unpleasant voice of the barmaid pulled me out of the nightmare. "Will you order coffee? Otherwise I need to put the kettle on." God, with what joy I heard this completely ordinary rude voice. Yes. Yes, of course, I bought almost a liter of coffee, but I didn't have to do it. I didn't sleep a wink until the morning, when my perfectly ordinary train approached the platform, and since then, I really don't like the sound of trains rushing in the dark, and I try never to change trains at night and at unfamiliar deserted stations.